Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome. It's great to see so many people, both new faces and familiar faces in the room. My name is Kevin Allison. I'm the president of Minerva Technology Futures. We're a geopolitical and policy firm based in Washington, D.C., focused on artificial intelligence and the AI technology stack. I'm really delighted that at the program we've developed for you at the end of what's been a very busy day. I'd encourage you all to make yourselves comfortable. We are still waiting for Minister Narayan, the UK AI minister, to arrive. He is on the campus and is on his way. So please make yourselves comfortable. While you wait, we'd like to play a short video for you on the topic of AI adoption and why we and others that we've been talking to around the world about this topic consider it to be so important. So while we wait, please enjoy the video, and we'll come back a few minutes after the video plays to open the formal program. So thank you very much for coming, and enjoy.
What makes AI special as a general purpose technology is its potential boost to economic productivity. Hi, my name is Jeff Ding. I'm an assistant professor of political science at George Washington University. I recently published the book Technology and the Rise of Great Powers, which explores the role of diffusion in how some countries were able to better capitalize on past technological revolutions. And in these past industrial revolutions, the crucial technological advances were general purpose technologies, or GPTs. And so the classic GPTs are the steam engine, electricity, and the computer. Because of their pervasiveness, they have the potential to usher in huge waves of productivity growth and transform the fates of national economies. The promise of AI is many scholars and practitioners see it as the next GPT. Maybe one aspect that makes AI even more exciting is the pace of change. GPTs, we know from history, usually take multiple decades to spread and diffuse across the economy. We're seeing AI take off and spread at a very quick rate, and so I think that's what's driving so much attention towards AI as a general purpose technology, a general purpose engine of growth. The countries that were able to cultivate the GPT skill infrastructure to diffuse and adopt general purpose technologies at scale ended up becoming the winners of these past industrial revolutions. And so success was not about which country produced the latest and greatest new to the world innovations. Instead, success was about which country could win the diffusion marathon. The race, the competition, was about which country could adopt and spread GPTs at scale throughout their entire economy. And that rested on developing the education and training institutions that could broaden the base of engineering skills linked to a GPT. I think the AI adoption initiative is essential because it puts the spotlight onto this humble, often neglected undertaking of diffusion. In these past industrial revolutions, we saw it was applied mechanics skills that were crucial to diffuse advances in iron making in the first industrial revolution. It was mechanical engineering skills in engineering schools and land-grant universities that were crucial to spread standardized parts manufacturing and interchangeable parts manufacturing throughout the entire economy. It was software engineering skills in the third industrial revolution that was crucial for the US to adopt computerization at scale. And so that's why my research points to the need to focus on this diffusion phase. For example, India has a future skills initiative that tries to raise the overall digital skills of its engineering population. The AI Adoption Initiative's working paper cites Singapore which has a Going Digital initiative that connects small and medium-sized enterprises with a chief technology officer through a virtual connection, and they are able to liaise with that CTO to get advice on what types of AI technologies they could integrate to improve their workflows. The role that governments can play is to build infrastructure. And this infrastructure can come in various forms, whether that's skill infrastructure, whether that's cloud computing infrastructure, whether that's common data sets, whether that's technical standards that allow interoperability and harmonization of different protocols. And so a large language model agent from one company can connect with the data source that's maintained by a different company. That's why governments build roads and bridges. And in the same way, governments should be in conversations with all these different stakeholders. They should be trying to identify what are the roads and bridges we can build in the digital AI ecosystem.
That's perfect. Okay, while we wait for our other panelists to arrive, we're waiting for the UK minister and for a representative from METI here in India. I wanted to kick off the discussion. I'm very pleased to welcome David Sapolsky, the Chief Global Affairs Officer and Legal Officer from Amazon, and Shubhi Agarwal, the co-founder and COO of Locobuzz, which is a company based in Mumbai, which is working on using AI to power customer experiences for companies. Once we have the ministers in place, we'll include their perspectives on the panels as well. But to open, I just wanted to make some scene-setting remarks to really set the frame for our discussion today. I think that Professor Ding in this video did a really good job of encapsulating what we've been calling the AI adoption imperative. Just for your context, Jeff published his book in October of 2024. And that month, we convened a workshop in New York City with about 75 global experts to discuss the question of if AI adoption really is the important thing in technology revolutions. You want to diffuse the technology, the countries that diffuse new technologies across their economies the fastest and the broadest, they tend to benefit the most from major technology transitions. If you buy that argument, then what is the role that public policy and governments can play in helping to accelerate adoption? One of the absolutely important data points that Professor Ding covers in his book is that technology revolutions take a long time to unfold. In an example that he uses in Technology and the Rise of Great Powers of electrification, although the technology for electrification, the electric dynamo motor, was invented in the late 1800s, it took 30 or 40 years for that electrification revolution to become widespread in the United States, which was the country that he was looking at as his example. Why is that? Well, no matter how advanced your technology might be, diffusing it through an economy takes time. It takes time because companies that might be investing in electric motors for their factory floors needed to become comfortable with the idea of moving away from steam power factory floors, where you had a steam engine that was powering machines around the factory, one centralized engine powering many belts that were turning all kinds of widgets and gadgets to make the factory operate. Electrified factories can operate completely different. Every single machine on the factory floor has its own engine, and you plug it into the grid. It was an organizational adaptation that needed to be made, not by one company, but by many companies across many sectors for electrification to really take off. So we had become fascinated by this policy problem, by this policy question. If you think that AI is the next general purpose technology revolution, then what are the roles that governments can play to mean that it won't take 40 years for societies to unlock productivity benefits across their economies? What meaningful steps can governments take to speed up this process? What's been fascinating about taking this idea, not just in New York, but we've also been on, I think the last count was 10 cities on 5 continents, convening discussions and workshops and panels to talk about AI adoption, is that this is very much an area where the global South countries or global majority countries have an opportunity to really be leading and innovating out front on this. That's because if you're thinking about widespread adoption, it's really adoption across the whole breadth of an economy, not only across sectors, but across different types of firms, from the very biggest to the very smallest. And what's interesting about convening here in India is just the breadth of different types of use cases of AI and the different types of firms, everything from the most globally oriented large manufacturers and industrial companies and technology companies all the way to small businesses. There is really a huge concentration of interesting use cases and interesting customer needs here in India that I think we can get to on the panel. I'm really looking forward to what Shubhi has to say on that. And with David's representing one of the biggest technology companies that not only is developing and deploying AI and helping others develop and deploy AI, but also running the infrastructure. I think we can get into a lot of those questions today. When the ministers arrive, there's another set of topics that we want to cover about how are governments thinking about this problem. What governments around the world are engaged in really innovative thinking about this. In the video, Professor Ding gave a few examples about India and its skills programs, and also about Singapore with its CTO, fractional CTO for hire program. But I'm sure there are other examples that we can talk about. And then finally, we want to move the discussion to very specific policy areas. So we want to talk about skills. I think that's the one very obvious area where there is a general consensus that governments have an important role to play in skilling their populations to be able to use AI. But I think there's an important additional corollary to that, which is that the way that AI itself is evolving means that those skills are evolving. The different skills that might be required to use AI effectively are also changing. It was the CEO of Cohere, which is a Canadian startup, who made the point to me once, who said, one of the things that generative AI is doing, it is giving us computers that people can talk to in their natural language. And it's allowing those computers also to talk to us. So it's not only a very interesting technology change, you can also think about it as a very interesting user interface change in the way that people interact with technology systems. And when you're talking about widespread adoption across the economy, many different sectors, many different sizes of companies, but also many different levels of sophistication of users within companies who need to be taught how to use these tools, it means it's a very exciting moment in the history of this brand new technology. So we are going to launch into our panel discussion. Once the ministers come in, they're going to come straight on stage, and we're going to put their feet to the fire and ask them for their perspectives. We are at the end of a very long day. It is a very busy conference, and I appreciate so many people turning out for this event near the end of the day's program. We are going to try our best to keep it interactive and lively for you. I did want to make two programming notes, however. First, this discussion is taking place under Chatham House rule, which means that you are free to use the information you hear during this session, but you must not quote any particular participant or attribute a quote to a particular person or a view to a particular person. So feel free to use and be informed by what we say today, but please respect the Chatham House rule. I believe there might be some members of the press. We ask you to respect the Chatham House rule as well, and just so that our speakers are prepared, just noting that for the record. The other programming note is we are not going to run a traditional Q&A session in the spirit of making this event very interactive. For guests who registered with us ahead of time, at the end of our discussion, we will be reconvening at the Meridian Hotel. We have arranged a coach bus, which is going to operate on a first-come, first-served basis. I'm not sure exactly what the capacity of that bus is, but I think if everyone wants to go, we're going to have a little bit of trouble. So you might be wanting to think about taking an Uber or some other kind of ride. But we're going to reconvene at the Meridian Hotel for an extended reflection and conversation on what we talk about here today, but also what we've learned through the first couple days of the formal program of this event, this summit. So very much looking forward to that. We are going to keep that very relaxed. There's going to be lounges. There are going to be chairs and sofas to sit on, tables. There will be a big focus on gathering together this expert community that really cares about AI adoption as a policy topic to have good conversations. We will have a short formal part of the program when we reconvene at the Meridian, where we will invite people to speak and contribute their perspectives to this discussion and talk about AI adoption. So that's the opener. I'm going to sit down. We're going to start the panel, and we'll see where we get to. So thanks again for coming, and looking forward to a really interesting discussion. All right, so we're going to get a chance to hear from representatives of the Indian government and from the UK government. David, I wanted to start with you. From your perspective at Amazon, again, really interesting business. You're building infrastructure in many countries. You're developing and deploying your own models. You're enabling many other companies to develop and deploy their own AI. How do you see the AI adoption challenge? Do you have examples of where policymakers have been getting this right? And can you kind of tell us a little bit about that and some of your reactions to what Jeff Ding was saying on the video?
Sure, and if you haven't read the book, I recommend it. I'm a history buff, and so I enjoyed kind of reading his take on prior technological revolutions. And I think, there was a misimpression when ChatGPT went viral that AI was going to magically take over everything, and everybody would be using it whether they had a choice or not. And I think 2-3 years later, we know better. All of the fears and the uncertainty and doubt that engendered from governments, from civil society, and from all quarters, was a little overhyped, to say the least. And so we realize now that this is not magic. It's going to take time. It's going to take innovation to find ways to adopt and apply this technology in ways that are actually going to solve real problems for real people. So increasing productivity, making things more efficient, letting us do things that we couldn't dream of doing by ourselves, using AI and AI agents. So that's still very much in development, which is a long way of saying there's work to be done. The adoption isn't going to happen on its own, and there's opportunity for different countries to do that work and spread that technology. So I would just say, listening to you and reflecting on the video, in terms of what governments can do, the first thing I would say is, unlike some of the prior technological revolutions, you have an incredibly vibrant private ecosystem of large and small companies and medium-sized companies who are eager to do this. And so the first thing governments can do is not stop them. Don't do harm, right? We all agree, and Amazon has long advocated for responsible, careful deployment and development of AI technology. And Amazon has also been an advocate for careful, responsible, principled, and risk-based regulation where appropriate. And we've supported that. But in the rush to address fears, you see some parts of the world, including in the United States, regulating away and essentially making it much more difficult and expensive to adopt this technology. And I think that is the wrong way to go. And I think when you look around the world now, you see some buyer's regret. You see Europe, you see Colorado. They're all sort of saying, wait a minute, maybe we don't want to go that fast. Maybe we want to slow down and delay and see how this plays out. Because now that we're living with this technology and we're seeing some of the use cases that are very exciting, maybe we don't want that to stop. So that's number one. And the other is education, which I think was a part of the video. You need to be able to have the institutions in place to train the next generation of users, adopters, developers, innovators. India's been way ahead of the curve, as has Singapore. And they've gotten 50% more of that education out there than anywhere else in the world. Amazon has announced a commitment not just to skill people all around the world with our general cloud and AI education programs, but in India, we're going to try to reach 4 million public school children, exposing them to AI, bringing them along that adoption curve. And so India, I think, is taking some of the right steps. They have been cautious in principles and risk-based in their regulation. They have invited investment so that private companies can come here and build the architecture and infrastructure that's going to be required to use, adopt, and diffuse this technology. And I think that's promising, but this is still early days. It's a wide open frontier. And as you look around the hall here and talk to people, I hope everybody's eyes are getting open, as are mine, in some of the new and interesting use cases that this technology can accomplish.
David, thank you. Shubi, I want to get your perspective as a startup founder and how you're using AI, but also how you are seeing the adoption issue unfold. But before I do that, could I do a quick temperature check in the audience? We're all here because we're working on AI in some professional capacity. Like, it matters that we talk about AI for our jobs, but who's actually using it on a daily basis to do your job? Okay, who is using the kind of retail chat window like ChatGPT or Claude versus who's actively using Claude Code or Amazon Bedrock? Okay, that's interesting. I think that itself is just a change since we started convening discussions on AI adoption in late 2024, where many people were experimenting with the kind of chat bot window, but just looking at how the tools have evolved. And again, back to this point that the user interface is evolving in ways that let people who are not at all computer science PhDs use these tools in very interesting ways on specific concrete problems. So Shubi, maybe that's a way to pivot to you. From your perspective, running a startup here in India, how do you look at the AI adoption issue? And I'm interested maybe for you to tell people in maybe a couple of words what LocalBuzz does. Sure. But then where do you see opportunities for government, like David said, to not get in the way, but actually to help adoption go faster or to help you do your business faster?
Hi, everybody. First of all, thank you so much for being here. It's 6 o'clock. I don't know about you, but yeah, I must be tired because it's a long, long day. Before I start into the second part of the question, I just want to take a few minutes to tell you what LocalBuzz does. We are a startup and have been working in the space of AI-powered customer experience, which basically brings about social listening, response management, insights, and analytics into one single platform. It is being used both by enterprises as well as the governments and policymakers to find out what it is that people are talking about their brands / policies or practices, and then use this insight to then make decisions, whether it is for enterprises, marketing and business decisions, for policymakers to find out the impact of what it has done for people. So real-time temperature check or a feedback loop kind of a thing, which empowers a lot of practices. So we work with organizations like IRCTC. So if, say, for example, somebody writes about, having a medical situation while on the train and help is needed immediately, that is something which can be immediately actioned by the department by using our platform. So this is just one of the use cases, but there are multiple things which are happening. When it comes to AI, I think it's still very, very new. It's still very, very exciting. A little bit scary as well, because everybody, like including some of the people in my team, they're like, okay, so what will I do now? Because if everything is going to happen by AI, what is the point of me doing in engineering? Yes, I think we need to all rethink of what our children will be doing and what they will be doing. Definitely not, engineering will not be one of the most coveted professions, as I feel, in the future, because English to engineering has become very, very possible at this point in time. However, when we look at the enterprises that we work with or the organizations that we work with, the common obstacles which I find in the way of AI adoption is not entire, like if we go ahead and create a complete plan which is a lot more sophisticated, that will definitely not work. So it's creating and breaking it down into simple use cases, into simple models which can be easily incorporated in the business models which are already existing, which talk to the tech stack which is already present within the organization. Then it creates a little bit of comfort with what we are bringing to the table. Once that is done, none of the CMOs or anybody of a C-level executive will be interested in knowing, okay, my accuracy of my AI model is 90% or 99% for that matter. So then we have to go ahead and kind of translate that into business matrices or ROIs, which can be then measured, because that is what they understand. So it's not about creating a new ecosystem, creating a new parameters of learning. It is what I already know, but I need to know all of those parameters using this technology and how it is actually helping me measure that sooner, faster, and more efficient. Then once all of this is done, we typically look at it in a way that adoption will not happen very, very drastically. It is a small transformation where it starts from an AI powered or AI assisted and actually then becomes AI powered. So it's a journey, and some of the enterprises that we are working with have already taken that with us, and we are encouraging. But it's gonna be a bit of time before clear embrace of AI happens at that level.
David, maybe to come back to you and kind of riffing on what Shubhi was saying. It seems like there's a piece of it is kind of, if you think again about what is the useful role for public policy, for government policies in encouraging faster adoption, there is kind of an information problem that especially small companies face. Like maybe again to ask the audience, anybody here wish that they had a kind of register of really good use cases for using AI in your particular work? Like anybody feel a little bit time squeezed and not quite able to keep on top of all of that, right? But I wanted to ask you, like, what are some other maybe hidden barriers to faster adoption that, from your position in one of the big companies, again, working across the whole stack, what are some hidden areas where governments might not be thinking about bottlenecks and problems with speeding up adoption and getting diffusion right?
Yeah, well, I'm mindful that we may actually have more panelists, so I'll keep this short. I think first of all, we've talked about we've talked about education, which is a big part of it at every level. I think making this technology, making the infrastructure available to small and medium-sized enterprises, as we saw that Singapore is doing on a government level, helping to provide access to models, to the tech stack that allows experimentation. There's public investment in AI, so modeling the types of things that can happen, and really India is at the forefront of leveraging its digital infrastructure, digital public infrastructure, which provides cloud-based services to citizens all over the country. To incorporate AI into that, that's a huge needle mover. And then obviously we've talked a little bit about the policy environment, creating a policy environment that doesn't inhibit innovation and that's compatible with other countries, where you're not creating a sort of a backwater, a policy backwater that makes it impossible for companies to migrate their technology across borders. So those are something. And one more thing, just to follow up. I think, and this may not be as much of a government thing, but it's partly, there's a cultural shift that has to change. At Amazon, even within the legal and public policy groups, we had to intentionally change our culture from we're doing what we're doing, this is cool stuff, I'm not going to look at it right now, to no, actually take the time to understand what tools are available and give some thought to how you can do your jobs better. Because once you do that, you start seeing transformation, you start seeing improved productivity. And I think, honestly, walking through these grounds and just the gesture of what the Indian government has done by hosting and throwing open the doors to an event like this helps move the culture to one that is more not only accepting, but thirsty for use cases and ways of adopting this technology to improve lives.
Excellent. Kanishka Narayan, welcome. So just by way of introduction, Mr. Narayan is the Minister for AI for the UK government. Very pleased to have you joining us on stage. We've been talking about AI adoption as a distinct policy issue, asking the question, if you believe that the widespread adoption of AI, of economically useful AI applications is important for your country, if that should be a strategic goal that a country should have, then what is the role for public policy? What is the role for government that private companies and market forces either will take a longer time so government can speed things up, or there's some kind of market failure where they might not get there at all? That is the overarching theme of what we're talking about today, trying to highlight specific policies that governments that are doing this right are getting right, and trying to highlight some barriers and bottlenecks. So I just wanted to just turn the floor to you for your high-level thoughts on that question, and I think we're specifically interested in what you are most excited about what the UK government is doing on the adoption issue.
Great, thanks very much for having me here, and apologies for the delay, but I expect everyone has empathy for the traffic context at the moment. Can I start by firstly saying to your hypothetical of if you believe adoption is the big driver of productivity, in the UK, we believe that adoption is the biggest driver of productivity. And so let me get the caveat out of the way and say this is very much the central question for British AI public policy today. And I think there are four things that are really top of mind. People, proof, place, and at the heart of it, PR. And I'll go through each of them and what we're doing. So on people, both at the very outset, you find the technological diffusion and adoption happens best when before the evidence is present, you hear it in the whispers, murmurs, and word of mouth recommendations of pioneers of adoption. And so what we have been focused on in government is both championing in the kind of leadership context in departments the adoption of AI, but really critically at the kind of economy and society level, finding AI ambassadors and sector champions who are out and about, banging the drum for what they have done and where they have found most value. So the sort of heart of it, or the starting point, is the people aspect, of course, long-term, that effectively converges to a skills policy question. The second part, alongside people, is ultimately to make it not just systemic, and not just heroic change at the outset, but systemic change long-term. You need proof. You need to show people that this isn't just something that is the current fad, but ultimately there is time to value, return on investment, both in the public context, the private context, there. And so what we're trying to do is effectively scale up where we were in terms of pilots and now evaluate them as robustly as possible in the public context of deployment, but also encourage more and more of that in the private context so that we build systematic foundations for adoption. So people and proof of impact are two big things. The third thing is that when you really focus on the central mission for us, which is not just to adopt AI, but to adopt it to bring the entire country into this wave of prosperity, then you have to make it true in a particular place. Very often we talk about sort of adoption and technology in a very abstracted way. What we are trying to do is to say, if we just alight on one place, so in our case, for example, we've picked the town of Barnsley, and we've said in Barnsley, we're going to make it our tech adoption exemplar. And we're doing a bunch of stuff. The hospital in Barnsley is using AI to be able to accelerate the waiting experience for patients. Schools are using AI in Barnsley to be able to close the educational gap between those who have and those who don't. We're looking at how small and medium-sized companies in Barnsley can be right at the forefront of deploying AI as well. So what we're doing is saying, take a place and make adoption real for people as well. And so once you have people, you have proof of impact, you converge on a particular place, I think the thing you then have to do is exactly what David was talking about, which is that ultimately content and culture are the most scalable intervention in government. And so you have to get the PR right. You have to be able to talk it up, talk about, yes, a nuanced sense of the downside risks in some of this stuff, but at the heart of it, what the specific opportunities are. And I think all of those four things are really critical aspects that government can contribute very materially on.
And so going from those kind of four broad points or four areas of emphasis, what, in addition to the Barnsley example, well, can you tell us where Barnsley is?
Barnsley's near Manchester.
Near Manchester, so middle of the country. How are you, one of the things about AI is it tends, at least in the research and development part of AI and the frontier of the technology itself, it tends to be a superstar business where the cutting edge is really driven by a handful of researchers. In the adoption context, you can imagine a city like London just kind of eating up all the gains of AI potentially, just because it's the hub where everything's happening. How can you, in a structured way, so not just the one example of Barnsley, how can policy in the UK help push that adoption wave out so that Barnsley and whatever the equivalent town in Wales or Scotland might be, what specific policies are you doing to kind of do that diffusion part of it geographically?
This is a great question, one very close to my heart. I represent a Welsh constituency, grew up in Cardiff, and so I believe that the opportunity of technology and AI can be made the most of across every part of the United Kingdom without compromising the overall effect. And so to your precise question of how do you do that, well, one of the big things about AI, unlike the last wave of SaaS and software, is that some of the fundamental bottlenecks are the material reality of land, of water, of energy. Those things are much more diffuse than just the concentrated benefits of people around the water cooler in London or Silicon Valley talking about code. And so when it's not just about the concentration of code, but instead the diffusion of physics, the material reality of the world that we're in, I think the opportunity to spread the benefits are clearer still. And so we're focused through a program called the AI Growth Zone program. We are building large-scale compute capacity right across the country. We have announced 10 billion of investment in South Wales with 5,000 jobs, 10 billion of investment in North Wales with 5,000 jobs, 8 billion in Lanarkshire and Scotland with 3,500 jobs. We've got about 10 to 15 billion in the Northeast. So we're spreading compute investment across the country because we think it's actually the optimal thing for the country, not just because we want to spread that opportunity. And when you do that, you have that level of capital investment spread right across the country. I think the way you build durable consensus in those communities is to then say this isn't just a black box data center in your community, but part of that compute capacity will be reserved for students in those schools to be able to do experiments that ultimately change their sense of what is possible in their future. For public service deployments, that mean the local hospital can benefit from that as well. And at the heart of it, if we can build some startup ecosystems in each of those clusters, South Wales has a great history of both semiconductors and energy generation. North Wales is where we're putting SMRs, so companies using compute to be able to do energy innovation in that particular context. In the Northeast, we have our largest listed tech firm, Sage, located on the site that we're building a lot of the compute as well, and so financial services innovation using that compute. In each of these places, you start by saying we can spread this because that's the right thing to do in terms of the optimal thing for compute location. But when you're doing that, you then press home the point that if you can layer onto that compute a bunch of the intangibles that make places deeply innovative and spread opportunity as well, you capture a lot more of the excitement and the value right across the country.
Thank you. Compute came up a couple of times in that conversation. And David, I was wondering if I could turn back to you, maybe going back down the row. We have a few minutes left. It felt like compute was really a huge discussion 2024, 2025. And heading into 2026, there was another big discussion emerging around what some governments call digital sovereignty. And I wanted to kind of see if I can pull you in here to say, again, from your perspective, do you see governments that are looking at digital sovereignty? Do you see that as being in tension with adoption? How, here at the summit or in some other conversations that you've been having, how is that sovereignty issue, how are you responding to governments that are saying, we want sovereign AI, whether it's for local languages or whether it's for security reasons? How do you respond to that trend, and how do you connect it to the adoption challenge?
It's a big question, so I'll try to be short. I mean, first of all, I do think that it is that the sort of urge towards sovereignty, cutting off digital borders, restricting free flow of information is always going to inhibit innovation. I mean, I think if you think about every one of Amazon's business models, the stores, movies, culture, cloud, like it all depends on open borders, free flow of goods, free flow of information, and so any barrier to that sort of breaks our business models, and I think is generally bad for the world. That said, I think over the course of time, you look at the countries where companies like Amazon have invested, and regardless of the geopolitical moment of the day, these are the investments that these companies are making, including Amazon, are generational. They're going to far outlast my career and the careers of most of our government leaders, and they reflect an optimism and confidence that over the course of time will continue to be partners technologically and geopolitical allies. And that's certainly why we're investing, we've invested $40 billion here in India. We're one of the largest investors here. We've committed to invest $35 billion more in the next several years. So when you define sovereignty, and everybody has their own definition, it's important to start out with what do you need? What does a customer really need in order to guarantee their data is safe, their usage is safe, that they can control where their data goes, and that they control who has access to it. It's not defined by what's the nationality of the parent company that may own that built the facility in this country. If you can get the basics right, the customer experience right, then you can control sovereignty. And AWS Cloud has been built with our digital sovereignty pledge from the ground up. So you can control where your data goes, and customers can control where it's stored. If you want it stored here, great. If you want resilience and you want a copy stored in a different region, great. That's your choice. If you want to encrypt the data at rest, at movement, you can do that. You have the tools to do that. If you want to control who can possibly have access to the encryption key, we provide those means as well. So even if the operator of the cloud service wanted or was supposedly legally compelled to look at that data, they wouldn't be able to because only you have the encryption key. So those tools are available. We can build sovereign clouds, the tools that customers require to get the security and safety that they need. And I think, I don't just speak for Amazon, I think most of the companies thinking deeply about this are looking for ways to provide that assurance to customers who have these concerns.
There's something you mentioned, a theme that comes up again and again in some of these discussions we've been having about the need for companies to feel confident that they can quickly embrace AI. That kind of speaks to a little bit the idea that you can sit down and say, hey, I can put my company's data through this model and get this output, and to feel good about that is really, really important. Having that confidence backstopping. And it's interesting to see governments taking different approaches to this. The last two questions, I want to go to Shubi, and then I want to come back to you. Shubi, you mentioned something really interesting about skills and education. One of the challenges that I see starting to emerge is how are companies thinking about making sure that their workers have the skills they need to do work, to develop the discernment and the knowledge and experience to know if what AI is telling them is right. This seems like a big challenge that's only just starting to kind of come up in some of the discussions. When I was a kid, everyone dreamed of having a machine that would do your homework at school. And it's kind of funny to think about, but we basically have that now. How do you, whether it's a student or whether it's someone in the early stage of their career, who will be able to ask an AI model very complicated questions and get pretty good answers. What should governments be thinking about that in skills? And then I wanted to maybe ask you to respond to the same question, but to Shubi first.
The short answer will be yes, because yes, we need to start early. The education system itself needs to now change and evolve and deploy these AI skills as a part of that entire comfort which students feel that, okay, I'm gonna work with this and I'm gonna do more with what I have because the whole world of knowledge is actually now available to me in this machine which we had. Now I can actually talk to it and get answers which are making me more efficient and productive. So yes, it has to happen, but after that, the next responsibility of educating the young adults and the young employees also lies with companies like ours. Typically what happens is when we hire people, it takes about 3 to 6 months before people get skilled, even if they come with the right kind of background, to understand what the business is doing, to understand what is required to be done. And that gap can be changed and that can be reduced if they already are conversant with the technologies like AI, which they are kind of using now. For now, I remember the instance when we first put Claude Code in the office and then we asked the engineers to start using that. There was so much reluctance. And it's not like, okay, it's like your boss is telling to use this, just use it and try it out and see what happens. But it's like there's a comfort in working in a certain way, and that comfort needs to be handled because that's the human way of reacting to a change. It needs comfort. You need that assurance that, okay, if I'm using this and if I make a mistake, I'm still okay. So mistakes will be kind of tolerated. So right now, I think we are at a place where we at Locobuzz are giving an environment to our engineering community and other business community as well, like the engineering and the non-engineering employees, to work with AI and make mistakes, because it will happen. But I think it is a journey, like I said in my previous response as well. It's a journey. And it has to be taken together. So all of us will evolve on the other side of the tunnel much smarter and more evolved. And just like other revolutions that we have gone through, I think as human beings, we will survive the AI revolution as well and come out much stronger for sure.
Yeah, I mean, the skills question is a really central question, because if you step back and you say, what is the primary political framing for AI policy, it is whether we end up extending human agency with AI and technology, or whether we end up subverting human agency with technology. And at the heart of that is the skills and capability and agency of people, both young people coming into the jobs market and people who are already in jobs, to be able to exercise agency over AI. And so what does that mean in practice? In the early stage of life cycles, so in schools, for example, the central question we're focused on now is, as AI erodes the sort of some of the foundational bits of work that we each have to do in our painful bits of homework, how do you get young people to build the sort of foundational cognitive understanding of good information and bad information, of chain of thought logic, so that they can really see through the rungs of the ladder that you have to walk up to be able to get to an answer. And so we've started to make some changes, but I think we've got a lot more to do on that particular question. On the question of skills in the workplace, the broad framing that I talked about of extending human agency effectively means, how do we most quickly enable people to become the most proficient managers of AI? To be able to understand enough to be able to oversee AI, tell when its agentic workflows are delivering bad outcomes or good outcomes, to be able to understand, again, the logic of the specific chain of thought that delivers particular work outcomes as well. And that is really the central question of, when you don't have graduate intakes of the same scale as you might have had historically, how do you get graduates to most quickly become kind of managers of lots of AI agents in the workplace? That's the sort of skills focus that I think we're keen on developing more and more of.
Great. We're nearing the end of time, and we do have one more final round-robin question that I wanted to ask to all of the panelists and invite them to answer in a minute or less. But before I do that, I wanted to kind of draw together some of the threads that we've been talking about. Predictably, the time has flown by, at least it has for me. I hope it has for you as well. At the end of what we said at the beginning, had been a long and eventful day. I think the main thing, beyond the overarching point of the need for specific thinking around adoption policy as its own distinct policy issue, is all the different levels that this needs to happen for it to really work and to work quickly to pull forward some of the productivity gains that I'd say people who are most excited about the potential of AI have been talking about. It needs individual adaptation. Individual people themselves need to maybe become comfortable and fluent with the technology. It requires organizational innovations, where I think a lot of the adoption discussion has focused. But it also requires institutional, cultural, and bureaucratic innovations. And I think that the challenge is the technology evolves extremely fast. People can also, individual people can pick up these tools and use them increasingly fast. But organizational and bureaucratic change happens slower speeds. It happens at institutional speed or at political speed. And I just, from the experience we've had over the past year and a half of AI adoption initiative discussions and talking to people like the experts on this panel, it's pretty clear that although there isn't one solution, one silver bullet for this, at least the conversation is happening. So that's very heartening. For the final round robin question, a big part of the summit in India here this year has been the idea of creating a global AI commons. India is focused not only on its own domestic AI ecosystem, but finding opportunities for some of the ideas and thinking and applications that develop here in India to serve other countries in the global south. I was just curious, what do you, as a person who looks at this, and we'll just go down the row, what do you see as the biggest opportunity for global south countries in AI adoption? Is there one particular thing that stands out as an attainable, accessible way that they can speed up adoption and pull forward some of the gains of this technology for themselves?
Yeah, I think the starting point is that in the UK we are very focused on this question of how do we make AI, as the summit name suggests, impactful for people in their day-to-day lives right across not just the United Kingdom, but across the world. And so through our particular program, the AI for Development program, we're very focused on extending the capacity and capability of people across the world, starting at Bletchley with a focus in particular in Africa and subsequently throughout Asia as well. The specific thing that I think is really promising, that I'm seeing a lot of in India, for example, is this focus not just on the huge upside and capability that you get from scaling large language models, but instead partnering on building small language models, building very efficient deployments that work around the realities of people's existing lives, workflows, and day-to-day experiences. And as a result, are able to drive much faster pace of adoption and diffusion in those places. That's what we're very excited about in some of the contexts that we're seeing in, deployment in as well. And in that context, I think becoming in Britain the home of open source talent, making sure that some of the initiatives we have in government through the Incubator for AI, as well as the AI Security Institute, building open source infrastructure to be able to then share that across globally as well is a really important part of our toolkit.
Thank you. David?
Well, since it's part of my job, I'll put my policy hat on. And I will just say, every time you have a significant technological disruption like this, it provides an opportunity to sort of reset the field. And so in parts of the world, mobile phones allowed countries to their citizens to leapfrog PCs and leapfrog the sort of early internet into an advanced state that they can get to more quickly than it took other parts of the world, even though those technologies may have originally been developed there. And I think AI is one of these opportunities to leapfrog current state and bring your country into parity, and if not leading, as I think India is doing, using this new technology. And so as you see some countries try to export their regulatory regimes that may or may not be ready for real use, I think countries that are looking at that choice would do well to think about the potential, think about the opportunity to use these technologies to really vault forward in their own development journey.
Okay, Shubi, to close us out.
Thank you. I think the global south countries, the currency is people. Here are a lot of us, and the youth, it's a young population, ready to disrupt, ready to learn, ready to adapt, with the right kind of infrastructure and skills at scale, which we all talked about. I think a lot of companies like Locobus can come in the forefront, and then that will actually change the entire picture when it comes to representing AI first technologies in the global platform, because we are already working with a number of global clients at this point in time which are using our AI capabilities, and we see like at that level they are quite open to trying out new stuff, because like I said, we are easing them into the use cases rather than force fitting certain use cases in the overall scheme of things. So I think it's slow and steady which gets done. We have to get things right, which is skills at scale and infrastructure, which I think we tick both. So it's just a matter of time.
Great. We are at time. That is a great note to end on. So please join me in thanking our panel, and thank you for your interest and attention.